Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, it is actually evening in Los Angeles. This is Bo Marianis from Stewardship Calling, coming to you live with the team from Ancient Faith Radio in Los Angeles at the Assembly of Canonical Orthodox Bishops meeting. We are right on the verge of having a closing dinner after an extraordinary day, and we saved the best for last today. Metropolitan Gregory of the Carpatho-Russian Church, the American Carpatho-Russian Church. I always keep forgetting
It's okay.
the A part of that. And also, not only is he the presiding hierarch of the Carpatho-Russian Church, he is the secretary of the Assembly of Canonical Orthodox Bishops, which is the person that keeps the assembly going in between these meetings and serves on the executive committee. So, for those of you that are regular listeners on Ancient Faith Radio, you'll know that Metropolitan Gregory and I did a program on my Stewardship Calling program. We set a record, I think, in the interview. I think
we did.
It was like over 2 hours, right?
2 hours and 20 minutes.
2 hours and 20 minutes. So we promise you, audience, it won't be 2 hours and 20 minutes because dinner is waiting. Anyway, Your Eminence, thank you very much for being here. Thank you very much for everything you do. So
thanks for the invite.
Yeah. Why don't you share with everybody kind of just your take on the weekend so far, from the services to today's meeting?
Okay, so the last couple of days we have gathered here in Los Angeles after being in Washington, D.C. in October of 2021. And it's been extraordinary. In other words, we are together again as hierarchs. Most of us are here. Many are not here in person for various reasons, but we are connected via the technology. And we're able to do the things we need to do, which is to try to exchange ideas, bring everybody up to speed on what's going on in our different jurisdictions, talk about things that are unifying us, things that we'd like to do together in the future. And it's just a great time to be together with bishops who you know by name, and some of us have very good relationships between us. The different jurisdictional bishops have become friends. I would say over the last 10 years that I've been involved in the Assembly of Bishops, I've gotten close to very many of the hierarchs, and we just are able to pick up the phone and talk to each other if we need something. But this annual meeting is nice because we celebrated Divine Liturgy yesterday in St. Sava, Serbian Orthodox Church in Los Angeles here. There were close to 20 bishops in the altar serving together. A little scary probably for the deacon and the priests that were involved, but it went very well, and we were able to ordain a new deacon in the GOA, who actually happens to be the Director of Operations for the Assembly of Bishops, Nicholas Anton. An excellent young man, very active, very productive, and now ordained a deacon. Of course, he will take on even more responsibilities. And so far, so good.
Well, it was really an incredible service to have all of those hierarchs there. And I shared earlier with His Eminence that there was a little over-under betting going on how long it was going to take for all the hierarchs to take communion. But y'all did it in record time, and then with all the chalices, it was fantastic to see all the people there, wasn't it?
Yes.
And to share the Serbian culture and the experience and the food and the dances.
And a beautiful church, fully iconed, I can say.
Yeah.
All spaces, all walls, ceiling, everywhere were icons. No white spaces, blank spots. Beautifully done. A lot of it mosaic work, which of course is a tremendous thing.
Did you notice that it was Sirio Tonelli?
Yes,
the same work we
of
had
course,
at the Cathedral
in the Cathedral in Atlanta, of course. And just a beautiful service, and so moving, uplifting. Bishops have a hard time, like everyone else, and they're lone wolves. They're not married. They don't have children. They're traveling a lot. But when we're able to get together as brothers, it's like a family reunion.
Yeah.
And a tremendous thing.
And that's something that I'm not sure the listeners fully understand, but having the privilege of sitting in that room and listening to you all refer to each other as brothers and to show respect. Not that kind of brother that you would sometimes knuckle under, but there's a loving respect, and even the disagreements have a loving respect component on it. That's powerful.
Yes, indeed. And especially the ones you're closer to, you can make the little joke or dig,
Right.
and no one is offended
Right.
because we are like brothers. I mean, we share many concerns, and we use each as a soundboard sometimes when we're challenged in our own jurisdictions or our own diocese, metropolis. And so it's always a good thing when, again, you have someone you can pick up the phone and call and have a good, serious conversation with.
Yeah.
But also can share all the joys that occur to us, and also help when there is sadness, which there is. Like all people in all lives,
Right.
bishops also have these kind of things happen within their own jurisdiction, but within even their own families.
Yeah.
They came from somewhere.
Yeah.
And so they have
I mean,
relatives.
bishops aren't just born as bishops out of
No,
nowhere.
no, we don't spontaneously erupt out of some egg somewhere.
Yeah. For those of you that don't know, His Eminence is also a scientist, having had a career in science before he became. So when you hear words like spontaneous eruption, it's not just a linguistic exercise. There's some science.
I'm a biologist by training, Bill. You know this,
Yeah.
and I spent 20 years in cardiovascular research before I went to seminary. So I went to seminary as a second career person in my early 40s. And so those are my roots.
Right. So you're in charge. If anything, God forbid, happens in there, we give you the defibrillator and you take care of it.
Yeah, it's not a problem. I actually prototype several defibrillators and internal defibrillators now. They can implant these bad boys in your chest, and if you have a problem, it'll shock you before you even know you had the problem, as opposed to big paddles on the outside.
Right.
So it's exciting.
Well, let's hope we don't have to call.
No, we don't want to do any of that.
Talk a little bit about let everybody know what it means. What is the secretary and the secretariat in the Assembly of Bishops? How does that function, and what's your role in the executive committee that also keeps the assembly going?
Okay, so the secretariat is made up of several members, you being one of them, who serve as sort of the facilitators, liaisons to the different committees. So a bishop, we have a committee on some aspect of the church. There's a bishop as the chairman. There may be other bishops as members, but there are other priests or lay people that are helping on the committee. But the connection between that committee and the assembly exactly is the facilitator from the secretariat. We meet on a monthly basis by Zoom, and we're touching base and updating ourselves. Okay, what happened on this committee? The committee for youth, the committee for canonical matters, the committee for whatever. What happened? Did y'all have a meeting? Are there issues that we need to address today? And then my responsibility as a secretary is to take that information and take it to the executive committee, which meets typically on a monthly basis. During the COVID years, we met every Friday at 11 a.m. for multiple weeks to try to deal with this crisis that we had, not only as a country and a global issue, but how is it impacting the church? So the hierarchs were discussing the executive committee and then putting information out to all the hierarchs, who then put it out to their priests to try to keep people safe, but for also to find ways to maintain the expression of the faith, not to get lost just because we were reduced in numbers in churches and things like that.
And I think that's what's important for everybody to know, that even for those that aren't as familiar with the Assembly of Bishops, is that there is an enormous amount of work that goes on every week, oftentimes below the radar screen, keeping things going, things moving, and the dialogue working towards not only this event, but the activities that happen as a result of this event.
Absolutely.
So just recently, in fact, right at the session right before we came up here, there was a wonderful discussion about the inter-Orthodox dialogues and the ministries that are happening by different cities, right? So two of them that you all had approved prior were in Akron and Atlanta. And you, by virtue of having spent a lot of time in the metropolis of Atlanta before you became the hierarch of the Carpatho-Russian Church, I know everybody in that Atlanta brotherhood and the clergy. Talk a little bit and share with everybody the really exciting developments that are happening now with this notion of creating a Orthodox community, a Pan-orthodox community by city without regard to jurisdictions.
So in Atlanta, I was there for 5 years working out of the metropolis. There were all the priests of the area. There were about 17, 18 of us, and we met every month. We would have a meal together. Someone would present something. Maybe we had a project we were working on. And it was beautiful, really. And we became very close. And then the Assembly of Bishops put together this initiative a couple of years ago and sort of took what was already happening with the brotherhood within these two places, Atlanta and Akron, and expanded it to include the lay people, and that every parish within that area would have representatives in the organization in addition to the priests. And so they could coordinate celebrations together, initiatives that were necessary in their particular area. Atlanta, probably a little bit further along than Akron, a bigger group, but still both groups taking care of their own area in sort of ecclesiastical ways, whether they're setting up projects to take care of the poor in their area or just making sure that no church is left behind. To have events that everyone is invited to. They bring speakers, and it's a beautiful thing. And so I'm excited for what's happening at AoC, not only in Atlanta, where I spent 5 years and know all the people, but in Akron, where I actually have a parish. The Carpatho-Russians have a small parish in Akron, and they're participating at some level in the group there. And it's a beautiful thing. We'll see from these two pilot groups. They have come back with some lessons and some goals for the next year, and start looking to expand with other brotherhoods and other communities where they are Orthodox of multiple jurisdictions, just so that we are not sort of lone wolves somewhere.
Yeah, and I think that's really the exciting news that people need to be aware of, that the Assembly is focused on fostering that grassroots connection of all the Orthodox of all jurisdictions, clergy and laity alike, and sharing liturgical opportunities together, but also sharing educational and work opportunities. And of course, I'm a little bit biased, kind of spending some time in the Atlanta area there.
Sure.
But they have 5 working groups that are doing all kinds of things, from community service projects. And so I think and you made the motion, or identified the motion for getting the Assembly's support behind creating this process and establishing it, and it was unanimous, right?
Correct. Now that we've had the reports from the 2 pilot parishes, 2 pilot cities, and their sort of brotherhoods and their expanded sort of community, now it's time to look and see, okay, what other cities do we add now? Right. And take the information we have learned from Atlanta, from Akron, and apply it to these other places as a baseline of stuff, so that they can start putting their sort of programs together. Right. And there are plenty of brotherhoods throughout the country, and they work well in some cases, some not as well. COVID against upside down everything, but the basis is there. We can continue to move forward, and we don't look at just the church, this year, next year. As hierarchs, we're looking at the church 20 years from now, 50 years from now. When 50 years from now, what did we leave in its place so that the church continues to grow? Right.
And that's a great segue, because in addition to the extraordinary work that you're doing for the Assembly and the Secretariat and on all the activities, you also have responsibility for a jurisdiction yourself.
Correct.
So for the benefit of those that didn't listen to our interview on Ancient Faith Radio a few years ago, talk a little bit about the American Carpatho-Russian Diocese, and tell everybody a little bit about it, because it's really an amazing story.
Okay, so the Carpatho-Russians came here at the end of the 19th century, early part of the 20th century, and they worked in the steel mills and in the coal mines of western Pennsylvania, most of them, like other immigrants that came from Eastern Europe for these kind of jobs. They set up their churches, of course, and they were Byzantine Catholics for the most part, because in the homeland, that's what they were.
And for those that don't know, I don't want
Byzantine Catholics express their liturgical life like Orthodox, but they have an allegiance to the Pope as opposed to one of the patriarchs. And the area where they came from, 400 or 500 years ago, they were Orthodox. Cyril and Methodius went into that area and gave them the faith of the Orthodox Church. Then there was a question historically about a seminarian who was married and had children and wanted to become a priest. And of course, there was no Carpatho-Russian bishop at the time, but the Roman Catholic bishop said no, because in America we don't have married priests. What do you mean we don't have married priests? They asked. In the old country, we do have married priests. Oh, no, not in America. So that went back and forth. The Vatican got involved. Eventually, the Vatican stayed with the bishop saying no. And they said, okay, well, I guess we have to leave. And so they departed from the Byzantine Catholic world and eventually found the Church of Constantinople that accepted them. They returned to their Orthodox faith from their motherland from hundreds of years ago and have moved forward since then. There are about 80 communities. They run from Canada to Florida, the Mississippi River to the Atlantic. 42% of them are in Pennsylvania, and the next is New Jersey, New York, Ohio, a few in the South, and 5 in Canada. And it's an amazing little diocese that just continues to keep going.
So, just perspective, 88 parishes from
80,
Canada.
80.
All right, 80 parishes from Canada down to the south is not necessarily what I would call little, particularly from the Mississippi all the way up to New York and stuff like that. So
Yes.
how much time do you spend on the road?
I believe one year I counted that I was on the road about 225 days.
Yeah. So
So
welcome to the life of being a hierarch, right?
Yeah. But what's interesting is when I was in the metropolis of Atlanta, Metropolitan Alexios had me not at a parish, but he had me as the hierokyrix or exomologos. So in other words, I was the itinerant preacher confessor. So I was on the road every weekend.
Right.
8 states of the South: North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, Florida, Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, and the eastern third of Tennessee, 74 communities. And so that life, I guess, trained me for this life.
Yeah. Is it fair to say, I know there's probably no metric on this, but is it fair to say that you probably heard more confessions than any other hierarch here today in the assembly?
Well, for 5 years, it was my job to hear hierarchs to hear confessions all the time. And there were stretches where I was I remember a 3-week period where I visited 22 days, 18 parishes, and heard over 150 confessions of an hour or more in length. Wow. Not just the drive-by shooting, I did this, no, long confessions.
Read me a prayer and let me go on the drive-through.
Let's sit down and let's talk about this. And so, yes, I heard many confessions, thousands of them. Yeah. And over 1,000 different people came to confession at least once because I actually kept their first name on a list. If they came a second time, I didn't write it on the list again. So over 1,000 unique people, but about 2,500 confessions over that 5-year period.
Wow. Just wrapping my head around that, it would be impossible to try and understand. So kind of what do you see as the future of the Carpatho-Russian Church? And then segue over until, you set the stage to talk about the 10, 20 years, 50 years ahead for the assembly and what really the purpose that we're all working towards as Orthodox Union in America. What do you think?
Well, I think all over the country, we are seeing not only the effects of COVID, but over time, the decrease in attendance. Fewer and fewer people are being active in their churches, and we are seeing, tragically, churches that close. They cannot maintain themselves. 5 people are left. They can't pay even the light bills. So how can we keep the church open? I believe that there are regions in the country where we have lots of this kind of development, economic regions, where if we were smart as hierarchs, we would sit down and say, okay, we got 4 different jurisdictional churches in this little town, and they're all dying. How about if we figure out which is the best physical plant? Let's put all 4 communities in the physical plant. Let's rename the plant so it's a brand new church identity-wise, and have all those people have a home together. And it doesn't matter if they speak, different languages culturally, but most of the generations now have mainly English in their services. But even if you didn't, okay, so we would have, we'd say, Lord have mercy in 3 or 4 or 5 or 10 different languages. Right. Who cares? Right. The Lord is hearing the words. What's important is that we're there, we're praying together, we are praising God, we're asking for the things we want, we're thanking Him for the things He gave us, and we have the opportunity to receive the body and blood of Christ, the medicine of our lives.
Mm-hmm.
We don't need anything else.
Mm-hmm.
So can we do that here in America? I think so. We're smart enough. It will come. It may take a little bit of time, but it will come. And I think at some point, the people of America will actually really discover orthodoxy. They know about it, some people, they have come, but we are just a drop in the bucket in America of the Christian faith or even religious people. But it is the full faith, and anyone who encounters it almost never leaves it. We don't hear too many people leaving from the Orthodox Church. We hear them leaving from all other churches because in their journey, and everyone has a different journey, they go through different denominations, different parishes, but when they come to the Orthodox Church, it's like, oh, I'm home. Mm-hmm. And if they're well received, and that's the key,
right.
If they're well received by whoever is in the church that day, they will stay.
Yeah.
You know, if they're not well received, they might give that church one more opportunity, but if they don't get a reception of some type, it doesn't have to be huge, just acknowledgement that I walked in the door,
right,
they will be gone and never come back.
You know, there's actually, you know me, I'm a data junkie on this stuff, but there's actually data on this that when people are looking for a new church, whether they've moved or they're whatever, seeking, it doesn't matter. The number one thing they look for is the quality of the sermon, 83%, that's the number
Absolutely.
one. Right behind it, like it's 78, 79%, is welcoming. Have I been welcomed? Do I feel like this can be a place that would be home for me?
Sure.
Yeah, and my family.
When I was just for a short term in Raleigh, North Carolina, when I was in the metropolis of Atlanta, I would welcome the people. I had the parish council give me a slip of paper who walked in the door that was visiting.
Right.
And at the end of the liturgy, I would acknowledge them before I gave my sermon. Stand up so we can see you. Congregation, make sure that you are hospitable to these people. And one time I said, and if they are not, please let me know.
So you're going to
take it. At midnight on that Sunday night, here comes the email.
Oh, no.
No one spoke to me at the coffee hour.
Uh-oh.
The next Sunday, I was fired up and told my parishioners never to allow someone to come as a guest and not show hospitality. Uh-huh. And it never happened again.
I bet it didn't.
But that Sunday it did. And it was a young man, and of course I invited him to come back. He did, but I let my parish know it depends on you.
Yeah.
They are guests in our house.
Yeah. And
it doesn't matter who walks in the door. The Holy Spirit has brought them to the church that day for whatever reason.
Right.
Open arms. Welcome, brothers and sisters. We're waiting for you. That's it.
Yeah.
And they will not leave. They will feel they are at home.
That's a pretty powerful message. I being a dedicated UNC Tar Heel your life, I can only imagine what that parish council meeting was like when you showed up with that email of that person that wasn't greeted. That must have been a Dean Smith fire and brimstone.
It was. We didn't have the problem again.
How many parishioners did you lose? No, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to say that.
No, I gained.
Yeah.
One.
Yeah, that's right. That's okay. Well, the thing that you said that is really so powerful, and I hope that everybody listened, is the future of Orthodoxy coming together and being one family under one roof, regardless of whatever traditions. We can share them all. We can enjoy each other's language, culture, food, right? And for 36 years, I was an M&A lawyer. So yeah, I can put deals together. I can figure out how these churches can come together, but obviously it takes the Holy Spirit and the leadership from the assembly to make that possible. So I hope it's exciting for other people to hear that. Okay, I am now standing in between you and dinner after a very, very long day. So I want to thank you once again for coming on the Ancient Faith Radio platform and sharing with all of the faithful the extraordinary work you do as the Secretary of the Assembly, an Executive Committee of the Assembly, as a presiding hierarch of the American Carpatho-Russian Orthodox Diocese, as a Tar Heel fan, as a scientific researcher, and all the other amazing things that you do for so many people. Thank you.
Bill, thank you for the opportunity, but if I am correct, you also are having dinner, so let's go.
Oh, let's do this. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that's a wrap, as we would say. But we're so grateful that you've been joining us here as we meet with all these wonderful hierarchs at the annual meeting of the Assembly of Canonical Orthodox Bishops in Los Angeles. This is Bill Marianne from Stewardship Calling and Ancient Faith Radio, bidding you adieu for the evening, and God willing, and the creek don't rise, as we say down south.
And in Louisiana, the levees don't rupture.
And the levees don't rupture. We'll see you tomorrow morning. Thanks, and God bless.
I mean.
That was good, baby.